Okay, can you see those okay?
Yes, yes.
All right. So all religions have something to say about economics, but we're going to primarily talk about the Baha'i faith this evening. We will touch on other religions also, but most of the emphasis will be on the Baha'i writings. I did not assign a quote reader. Well, I'll let you guys decide. Who would like to read that quote?
I will.
Okay.
The fundamentals of the whole economic condition. When the love of God is established, everything else will be realized. This is the true foundation of all economics. Reflect upon it. Endeavor to become the cause of the attraction of souls rather than to enforce minds. Manifest true economics to the people. Show what love is, what kindness is, what true severance is, and generosity. Abdu'l-Baha, The Promulgation of Universal Peace, and the page number is obscured.
Okay. So in that quote, it's very clear that there is guidance in the writings specifically on economics. Here's some more.
Want me to do one more?
Sure.
Because my microphone's on.
Yeah,
From the from the Universal House of Justice. The welfare of any segment of humanity is inextricably bound up with the welfare of the whole. Humanity's collective life suffers when any one group thinks of its own well-being in isolation from that of its neighbors, or pursues economic gain without regard for how the natural environment, which provides sustenance for all, is affected. A stubborn obstruction then stands in the way of meaningful social progress. Time and again, avarice and self-interest prevail at the expense of the common good. Universal House of Justice.
So the Universal House of Justice is the supreme body of the Baha'i faith, and they are located in Haifa, Israel. At the end of my talk, we can discuss more about that and what their function is. One of the other things that they say is that this social and economic disparity keeps the world on the brink of war and instability. In the time of the coronavirus, every disparity has been amplified, every instability, every vulnerability. Those that were already present in society have been amplified, and the virus has also introduced new ones. We observe them every day, and these disparities are not just about the virus, but how the lockdowns have been implemented by governments with no planning or provision for people who are poor, disabled, migrants, etc. The fundamental failure of institutional structures to respond adequately or productively has left the most vulnerable people across the world to fend for themselves and to manage or not, as the case may be. To me, this era could be distilled as the struggle between, quote, me versus we, and, quote, mine versus ours. And it's a real contest as to who will prevail. It's my view that we don't need social distance. What we need is physical distance and social cohesion. Universal House of Justice says that the fundamental to economics is understanding what prosperity is. So I'm going to define, this is my definition of economics and prosperity. So my definition of economics is the creation and responsible management of resources. Responsible management of resources. That includes responsible distribution. Some economists say that it's the management of scarce resources, but I don't use that word scarcity in my definition because often scarcity is manufactured, or it's mythologized, or it's politically induced. I define prosperity as the well-being of humanity and the planet. That's it. It isn't about material wealth. It isn't about how big your car is or how many trips you took last year, any of that. The well-being of humanity and the planet. Strategies for achieving economic cohesion are different for each community, and it would be inappropriate for me to make specific suggestions for various communities, but here are some concepts that I hope are helpful. I'm going to let you look at this diagram for a minute because it's complex. Kate Raworth is, in my view, the goddess of modern economics. She and her team have developed this donut diagram, donut economics, to illustrate a frame of reference to understand planetary sustainability combined with social justice in the context of economics. An illustration like this provides guidance for policy and planning, implementation. And if the donut is not balanced correctly, disintegration will occur. So if you look at it carefully, you can see how the disintegration can occur. So the question then comes, how do we implement something like donut economics? My answer to that is mutualism and altruism. Those two things are where we need to start. So, for example, the wearing of masks in this time of Corona isn't really about us. It's not really about the person who's wearing the mask, right? It's to benefit the people who are around us. And so it's an act of altruism to wear a mask. It sends a message that you care about the people around you. Mm-hmm. The choices that are being made right now about practicing this type of altruism are unusually visible to all of us. And so it's worth asking the question, how are we doing on that little piece of altruism? Mutualism is not charity. So now you might want to ask the question, how do we practice things like mutualism? And so here's a big list of economic suggestions for everyday use that comes from my friend Bahá'is. He has a huge website on Baha'i economics. He writes regularly for Baha'i teachings, and he also publishes articles in some of the newspapers in Canada. He's from Vancouver. So here's your first action step. I hope you're writing all this down. The first one is to set an example by living the life that you want to see. So here's an illustration. If you're a long distance runner or a long distance bike rider, say a racer, or even if you ride recreationally, you might know the idea of imagining yourself on the far side of a hill. So if you're climbing a hill and you're really struggling, you can sort of imagine yourself on the other side. It's called running through the hill. So instead of thinking about the struggle that you're having to climb this hill, and when will it be over, and ain't it awful, you're imagining yourself on the other side of the hill where you're moving downhill and things are much easier. So we don't deny reality, but we do look forward. We do look forward into the future. And we can do that. One of the ways that we can do that is by language. So instead of saying, we are trying, yeah, we're trying, we say, we are doing. We're doing this. And then it will come to be. We could say, we could. We can also say, we will. That is a much more emphatic declarative sentence that says what we want to be.
Mhm.
So to reach economic cohesion, we must call for justice. We must call for justice. And here is another quote.
Yankee, do you want to read?
I think she's muted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
now it's useful.
There you go.
Justice is in this day bewailing its plight, and equity groaneth beneath the yoke of oppression. The thick clouds of tyranny have darkened the face of the earth and enveloped the peoples. It's from Baha'u'llah, The Gleanings.
Okay. And Gleanings is one of the major
Writing.
books, publications of the sacred writings that we use. Here comes your next action step. Practice justice. Stand up for others. These are three of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King. We're reminded by Dr. King what happens to our soul when we look aside from an injustice.
Mm.
And I'm just going to read the end quote. We will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Stand up for others. Say their names. Do business with companies committed to not polluting, and tell them why. Don't just do business with them. Tell them why. Work with companies that make sure that their apps and websites are accessible to all people so that they're usable by everyone through inclusive design, and then tell them why. That isn't charity, it's good business, especially when a critical mass of people make it their business to hold people accountable, to be inclusive. Ultimate mutualism is to stand up for others who are different than you, even if you risk negative consequences, personal or professional. For example, men need to stand up for the inclusion of women, as well as women. The world is missing the potential of women and girls. Gender inequality costs the global economy, get ready, $160.2 trillion each year. It's also no accident that some of the places with the best outcomes from Corona are headed by women. This is the challenge, the pledge, and the challenge that was made by Owen Barter, and he's the Europe director at the Center for Global Development. And in this pledge, he's encouraging male colleagues, male experts, to commit not to appear on all male expert panels, or manels, as they're called. He's standing up for the inclusion of women, and he has had consequences for it. He's also had a lot of good things happen as well, but he doesn't care about the consequences. Cohesive communities, cohesive economies have attributes of living systems. And these are only a few attributes. There are something like 16 or 18 identified attributes of living systems. And they include things like the balance of interests among the parts, that all of the interests are in balance, and that all component parts are potentialized. We don't waste people. Any system needs such attributes to succeed. Otherwise, it will die. Constructive resilience is community economic cohesion can be reached by practicing constructive resilience. And you see a definition there. That's a working definition. It's an evolving concept that Baha'i scholars and community building practitioners are evolving in the present time. Constructive resilience occurs when new institutional structures are created that attract people away from the oppressive ones, making them obsolete, and they disappear. And for those of you who like theories and things, this is a diagram of one way to get to constructive resilience. This was a diagram from both from my doctoral dissertation, also from my book, which was an outcome of the research that I did on community building and emergency preparedness. So it's one possible process toward constructive resilience. To build cohesion, avoid false dichotomies and binary thinking. So here's a question. Do we save lives or open the economy? Why is it either or? Why can't we save lives and have a functioning economy? Either or statements like that do not reveal truth or possibilities under the surface. And one more current one that has emerged in the past few months with ride-sharing drivers in California. Are they employees or are they contractors? Some drivers and drivers' unions say there's a middle path. It isn't either or. It's and we have to develop the middle path. Here's your third action step. Hope you're writing these down. Practice hopefulness with ourselves and others. We know that hope has to be integrated within a person to avoid disintegration. It's the same with a society. Society without hope will disintegrate. We risk the compounded difficulties of our current circumstances leading us to abject despair, and we must resist it, and we must help others resist it. If we can't do that, we're finished. Now, there are trends that are emerging and have been emerging over the years that promote this kind of mutualism and altruism and hopefulness throughout the world. And so we're going to take a look at some of those right now. These women in India are learning new agricultural practices that they will take back to their village. The skills that they learn, they'll take back to their village and share those with other people, share their knowledge with other people. Here's your fourth action step. This is actually a 3-step one. So number A, educate yourself about something. B, share that knowledge with someone else. And C, activate that knowledge together with others. People in Colombia are resurrecting indigenous knowledge and skills to maximize agricultural production bypassing, quote, expert or exploitive corporations who do not have their best interest in mind. Here's an example of community members in Kenya making knowledge about healthcare available to ordinary people. Community banking in Mongolia. In this example, banking services are being made available to ordinary people along with economic literacy. So it isn't just providing a service, but it's teaching people how to manage their personal finances. A lot of people have seen this page. GoFundMe and similar platforms make it possible for direct giving to others, bypassing funding structures that favor the elite or those with connections. And speaking of ride sharing, the Uber concept is being reapplied to manage medical transport in rural Tanzania. And this isn't the only project that uses that concept. Here's a repair cafe, and in this example, this facilitates items being repaired by volunteers instead of being thrown out, and Pasadena has a repair cafe. This one is really important. This is a library of things, and the libraries of things are encouraging people to share resources sustainably. And they're now beginning to integrate with public libraries, particularly in North America, but I think also in Europe and other places too. So that in addition to lending books, you can also borrow things like tools or kitchen equipment that you don't use very often. You borrow it and then bring it back. So they're now becoming integrated into the public library systems. And so I wonder what other resources you can think of that would lend themselves to this kind of sharing. The same cafe, same stands for so all may eat. This is a great story. So you go into this cafe, it's located in Denver, and the first thing you notice is that there's no cash register in there, and there are no prices on the menu. In fact, the menu is just on a blackboard up at the front of the cafe. And so people pay what they can, or they pay what they want. The couple who started this tried to get financing, and every bank that they went to told them that their business model was crazy and it could never work, and they would not finance them. They said it couldn't be done. So they raised money from their friends and they used their savings to open the first same cafe, and it was done. There's now a network of community cafes around the world like this. Don't believe a banker. And speaking of banks, this is a time bank. This is an illustration of how a time bank works. In a time bank, people exchange time and skills instead of money. Here's the New Economy Coalition, and this is a good organization to get a sense of what's going on with economics and the corona virus. It's a good coalition, and it's a good resource to find out more. You know, we've all heard this overused saying that we're all in this together. these people will be happy to lay some reality on you about that statement. We're not all in this together. Typically, economic health of a region or a country is measured using GDP, gross national product, and other indices. But it's important that we measure economic health more accurately. And so here are some other indices that more accurately measure economic well-being, like the Better Life Index, the Sustainable Economy Development Assessment, and I like this one, the Happy Planet Index. So all religions have tenets that support this realignment, all of them. In Buddhism, it says, if one lights a fire for others, it will also brighten one's own way. Service to others, mutualism, altruism is in our higher nature. It's in our DNA. We're hardwired for it. And I want to end with the words of Abdul Baha, who wrote the most in the writings on economics in the Baha'i writings. This is also your final action step. It says, never lose thy trust in God. Be thou ever hopeful, for the bounties of God never cease to flow upon man. If viewed from one perspective, they seem to decrease, but from another, they are full and complete. Man is, under all conditions, immersed in a sea of God's blessings. Therefore, be thou not hopeless under any circumstances, but rather be firm in thy hope. Thank you.